swallowed neighborhoods. The rains also caused Sydney's main dam to overflow. Amid the destruction and danger, a glimmer of good news. Rescue crews were able to corral ponies marooned by the floodwaters and get them to safety. The next hour of CNN Newsroom starts right now. I'm Ryan Nobles in Washington. In tonight for Pamela Brown. This top stories tonight. An Ohio community pleads for calm as police release body camera footage of an unarmed man shot and killed by police. Plus, a deadly shooting at a shopping mall in Denmark. Police say several people are dead and at least one suspect is in custody. And wait until you hear what a Chinese F1 driver credits for saving his life after his car flips on the tracks and then jumps over a tire barrier. You're in the CNN Newsroom. Police in Akron, Ohio have released body cam footage of the fatal shooting of Jayland Walker. The disturbing video that police provided shows a car chase, a muzzle flash from Walker's car, the foot chase when cars stopped, and then dozens of shots fired by police which killed Walker. CNN's Polo Sandoval joins me now. Polo, you were at the Akron News Conference when the video was released. Break down this disturbing video for us.
So what this does, Ryan, it essentially shows you the moments leading up to and during the shooting. We'll play some portions of that in just a few moments, but first, obviously goes without saying, it is extremely upsetting. It is extremely disturbing. But law enforcement releasing that just 5 days after that Monday shooting, hoping that it will be adding more context to what took place here. And before we roll that footage, it's important to point out what police say initially was perceived to be a threat, which is when they tried to pull over Jayland Walker, police saying that during that vehicle pursuit, they not only heard what sounded to be like a gunfire, but also in some Ohio Department of Transportation video that was basically showing the highway, you see what appears to be a muzzle flash, a single muzzle flash from inside the vehicle that Walker was driving. Now, a few minutes after that, that's when this vehicle pursuit turns into a foot pursuit. And that's when, according to the police chief here, the 8 officers that engaged Walker say that he reached for his waistband and then appeared to essentially pose a threat to these officers. So again, a warning, the video that you're about to see is certainly disturbing, but it is what's fueling the demonstrations we've seen here in Akron the last few days. So now that you've seen that, I could tell you that what's really fueling the frustrations and the anger, not just for the demonstrators that we've seen marching on these streets that still continue with the roving, fairly peaceful demonstration here in Akron, is the question of why so many officers fired so many times. A preliminary autopsy report, according to one of the attorneys representing the family, suggests that Mr. Walker had as many as 60 wounds on his body. However, ultimately the coroner's office will have to determine if that's a mix of entry and exit wounds or perhaps injuries that were sustained in another way. But that is really what's fueling much of the anger here. Now, in terms of what else the police chief is saying, I asked him what was the most disturbing thing that he's seen in that footage that's been released by authorities, and basically suggesting that just the amount of gunfire that he sees and he hears, and that is one of the questions that remains here, and one of the things that state investigators now that are basically overseeing this case after the locals handed it over will try to see if each one of those fires, each one of those rounds is justified. Here's what the chief had to say earlier today.
They need to be able to articulate what specific threats they were facing, and that goes for every round that goes down the barrel of their gun. And they need to be held to account.
Now, almost immediately, the Akron Police Department handed over control of the investigation to state officials, including the Attorney General's office, that will oversee this and see if there's any sort of any crimes that were violated here. But I will tell you this, though. I did have an opportunity to speak to a spokesperson for the Walker family, and he tells me that so far, up to this point, they have been satisfied with the information that they've been receiving from police, or at least the level of transparency that they've been getting from authorities. And it's certainly at least noteworthy here, Ryan. You see, municipal law here, it basically requires that any sort of police-involved shooting, that body camera video be released 7 days after the incident. The police taking this unprecedented step to release it about 5 days after the shooting, hoping that people have a clear idea of what actually transpired. But when you hear from members of the community here, Ryan, and you hear from the demonstrators that continue to protest on these streets as helicopters circle above, they are still left with many, many questions. And the fire chief himself, rather the police chief himself, has been very clear in saying he has questions of his own, and he will leave it up to state investigators to try to find answers to some of those questions, Ryan.
So, Polo, you're obviously on the ground there in Akron. Describe the scene for us. Are things tense? Has the family asked for peace during the investigation? You know, what is the mood like right now?
Anticipating anger among the community, we actually heard from members of the Walker family who pleaded for demonstrators to remain peaceful, and that's largely what we've seen. Authorities here in Akron saw this coming, saw that people were going to be disturbed by that video and infuriated by it. So what they did, they actually went ahead and blocked some of the roads that lead in and around the police department here. That's one of the reasons why we're able to stand here. But what the Walker family told me just yesterday, Ryan, is that they are hoping that they will be able to preserve the dignity of their son and to let the investigation run its course, which is interesting. And I do have to say that the grace that we have seen from the Walker family is certainly something that's noteworthy. In fact, the police chief himself even thanked the family for the way they've been handling this. But as you can imagine, they are still distraught, they are still mourning, and they are looking forward to the day when this investigation will come to an end and potentially hold those officers accountable for perhaps using excessive force.
Okay, Polo Sandoval on the ground for us in Akron, Ohio. Polo, keep us updated if anything changes there. We appreciate it. The family of Jayland Walker held a news conference immediately after the body cam video was released. A family attorney says the case comes down to one fact.
They want to turn him into a masked monster with a gun, and we knew that. But I want to thank the chief for one thing he said. At the time he was shot, more than 90 or 60 or whatever the unbelievable number will be, he was unarmed.
CNN's legal analyst Lonnie Coombs joins me now to talk more about this. So Lonnie, does this case really come down to the simple fact of whether or not the suspect had a gun?
Well, that's a very significant point in the investigation here, Ryan, but there's a lot more to this, right? So the question is whether excessive force was used or not. For each officer, they have to be able to answer at the time that they pulled the trigger on their gun. What did they see? What did they hear? What did they know that led them to believe that their life or someone else's life was in danger that justified the deadly force that they used against Mr. Walker? And even at the time that they pulled the trigger, at that point they make that assessment. They can't just unload their gun on Mr. Walker. They have to continue to make that assessment. Is the threat still there? Is the threat neutralized? Do we need to keep shooting this many times from 8 different officers? Those are all the questions that go into whether this was excessive force or not. Now, the things that build up to that from the traffic stop on forward are things that can go on in the police officer's mind to help them to assess whether there's deadly force necessary or not at the time they shoot. But really, the critical point comes to at the time they started firing their gun, did they believe that their lives were in danger or someone else's life was in danger that justified that deadly force, and for it to continue as long as it did?
Yeah, and it seems as though the police chief is already trying to get out ahead of that, right? And he said that from what he has learned to this point, all the officers involved in this shooting felt that Mr. Walker had turned and was motioning and moving into a firing position. I think this speaks to what you're talking about, right? What did the police officers perceive to be the threat against them in that situation, right?
Exactly, and that was, I believe, at the critical point just before they started firing. And I want to mention a couple of things about this investigation, Ryan, that I think are important. One, this police chief brought in an independent agency to run this investigation very quickly so that it's objective and transparent, right? Two, we are seeing this information being released to the public, the body cam footage and other information that police have so far, so that we're being informed as it goes along. And three, the police chief said something very interesting. He said that those 8 officers that were involved in the shooting were immediately separated and monitored so they couldn't corroborate their statements. These are the type of important things that are done to make sure that an investigation like this into such an important shooting is done with transparency, objectivity, and with trust, some trustworthiness to it, so that we can have some integrity in the outcome of the results.
All right, so Lonnie, let's get your expertise, your legal expertise on a different topic, but a big topic that's been talked about this week, and that's the decision involving Roe v. Wade. Millions of women use apps to track their period cycles. What are the privacy concerns now concerning the collection of this data? Could governments theoretically get access to this information, or are we taking it too far?
Yeah, this is a big question, Ryan, that a lot of people are asking. Now that states that want to ban abortion are getting their laws into place, the question is, where does law enforcement go to be able to enforce these laws? And these fertility apps are apps that women have been using for quite a while now to gather information that's important to their reproductive health choices, right? So they track their fertility, they track their contraception, they track their sexual history, all information that's really important to the woman. However, it's also a treasure trove to prosecutors who are trying to prove if an abortion occurred or not. So is it protected by a right to privacy? We don't know yet. They haven't been tested. A lot of owners of these app companies are saying that they're going to do whatever they can to protect their users' privacy, but we just don't know yet. But what we do know, Ryan, there's a number of other sources of evidence that are used regularly in courts, such as texts and emails and search apps and tracking locations and bank information. So I was a criminal prosecutor for 18 years. I prosecuted many murder cases. In all of those cases, we had ready access through search warrants to the suspects' search engines to see if they were searching where to dump a dead body, to their emails and texts to see if they were plotting a murder, to their bank records to see if they were buying shovels or gloves or things like that, to their tracking information to see if they were in the area where the crime occurred. Now, if abortion is a crime, the body is the crime scene. And the decisions you make about your body end up becoming evidence for a prosecutor to prove if a crime occurred, if the abortion happened. So if you email your friend and say, hey, I'm pregnant, what am I going to do? If you search to see where there's an abortion crisis center, if you go to a location where an abortion clinic is, if you pay for a pregnancy test or an abortion pill with your credit card, all of that is information, data that a prosecutor can get access to be able to prosecute to prove if a crime, an abortion occurred or not. So women really need to start thinking about this as far as privacy concerns. In a post-Roe world, this is now evidence that a crime occurred.
Obviously, this decision has just opened up a number of additional legal and theoretical questions that we had not been faced with for 50 years. So, Lonnie Coombs, thank you for breaking down that small aspect of it. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we're going to update you on the situation in Copenhagen, Denmark, where multiple people have been killed in a shooting at a shopping mall. CNN's Nada Bashir is following the investigation. Nada, what more do we know?
That's right, Ryan. We are still learning more details as they come in from Danish police. That's mall in Copenhagen, Fields Mall, hit by a deadly shooting earlier today. We understand that several people were killed in that incident. At least 3 people have been confirmed to have been injured, although the details around those injured are still coming in. We understand that the hospital nearby where they were taken had to call in extra staff to deal with the emergency situation. Now, it is an ongoing investigation. Police have confirmed that they have detained one individual. A 22-year-old Danish man is currently in custody. Police have said that at this stage, it doesn't look as though there were other shooters involved in this incident, but they haven't been able to formally rule out the possibility of any further suspects who are involved in this deadly shooting. And also, they haven't been able to rule out whether or not this was a terror-related incident. That is, of course, the key question now as this police investigation continues. What was the motive behind this incident? Police have yet to confirm that key question. But of course, this was a truly tragic and horrifying incident. This is a busy shopping centre, a Sunday afternoon. And of course, there was also a nearby concert venue where pop star Harry Styles had been due to perform. And we heard just in the last hour from police officials confirming that they have been evacuating people from that arena nearby. The incident took place at the shopping mall nearby. Of course, this was a separate incident, but as a precaution, people have been evacuated from that concert venue. This has, of course, rocked the city. It is a truly horrifying incident. And we have heard from the Danish Prime Minister just in the last hour too. I can read you just a little bit from the statement that was issued by the Prime Minister's office. Denmark has been hit by a gruesome attack. Several were killed, even more wounded. It is incomprehensible, heartbreaking, meaningless. Our beautiful and usually so safe capital was changed in a split second. So clearly this is an incident which has rocked the entire city. We are still waiting for the details around that investigation. It is ongoing, but we do understand there is a heavy and significant police presence still at the scene as they continue their investigation. Ryan?
Okay, Nada Bashir, live for us in London. Thank you for that update. We appreciate it. And up next, COVID cancel culture blamed for getting a pediatrician kicked off the Healthy Kids Board in Florida. Dr. Lisa Gwynn explains why the truth got her in trouble. Also ahead, January 6 investigators teasing new revelations and new witnesses after last week's explosive testimony. And a miraculous escape for a Formula One driver as his car crashes and flips right over a tire barrier. You're in the CNN Newsroom.
We share this place, we all belong.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran. We are in Jerusalem.
Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why.
I just want to press you on one further point.
Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, today on CNN.
My name's Jim Brailsford, and I lead the Industry and Solutions Marketing team for Kinaxis. It's absolutely key that businesses incorporate sustainability into their business models. Firstly, you have got the corporate objective and being a good global citizen. You've also got the need to be reflecting that to your public, to your consumers, that show that you are actually being environmentally conscious. And also, as supply chains are more mature and are considering all of these things in a holistic way, it develops a sort of a steadiness to their operation. Supply chain sustainability will become a qualifier. It will not necessarily be the winner, but it will become a qualifier enabling you to participate in the competition.
One of the two Republicans sitting on the January 6th committee says the panel could make multiple criminal referrals, and Vice Chair Liz Cheney won't rule out former President Donald Trump being among them.
Ultimately, the Justice Department will decide that. I think we may well, as a committee, have a view on that. And if you just think about it from the perspective of what kind of man knows that a mob is armed and sends the mob to attack the Capitol and further incites that mob when his own vice president is under threat, when the Congress is under threat. It's very chilling, and I think certainly we will, continue to present to the American people what we found. The Justice Department doesn't have to wait for the committee to make a criminal referral, and there could be more than one criminal referral.
Joining me now to talk all about this, Ron Brownstein, the CNN senior political analyst and a senior editor of The Atlantic, and Margaret Tlaib, CNN political analyst and the managing editor of Axios. So, Ron, should Donald Trump be worried?
Yes, I clearly. Look, first of all, happy 4th, Ryan, Margaret, everybody watching. The committee has put together a very powerful case against Donald Trump, as well as others in his orbit. It's a little mystifying why it's the committee leading the train and the Justice Department seems at least a few steps behind. But in terms of detailing Trump's behavior, not only during the day, which is what we all thought, was the original expectation of the investigation. What did he do and not do on January 6th itself? But in terms of all of his actions leading up to January 6th, the pressure on the Justice Department, the pressure on state officials, the kind of coordinating with John Eastman and others who were told that and him being present and hearing that what they were doing likely violated the law. They put together a pretty strong case, and I think they're putting a lot of pressure on Merrick Garland and the Justice Department.
Yeah, so Margaret, CNN has learned that former President Donald Trump's White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, may agree to a transcribed interview with the January 6th committee. He wants an interview that would be limited to specific topics to try and avoid privilege issues. The committee probably wants a lot more than that. They would even like for him to testify publicly, but this is a negotiation. If Cipollone talks to the committee on any level, though, how potentially damaging could that be to Donald Trump?
It will be incredibly important follow-up information. The committee has had some communication with Pat Cipollone already, but in light of the revelations by Cassidy Hutchinson and perhaps other things they've learned, there's a lot more they want to ask him. And you're exactly right that it's a negotiation. He was White House counsel for the second half of the Trump administration. And we know from others' testimony that he didn't think anything that was happening on January 6th was a good idea, that he believed that they could be criminally prosecuted if the former president had gone to the Capitol that day. The concern for the committee is that he could have privilege claims depending on what they want to ask him, and that would create a slow walk situation that could run out the clock into a point where Democrats potentially didn't control Congress anymore and that committee evaporated and other concerns like that. So there's going to be a space where his interests overlap the committee's interests, and that is the space where the public and all of us will potentially get really important new clarifying information and revelations about the president at the time, former President Donald Trump, his team what they were talking about, what they were doing, and what kind of advice that he was getting.
And I think it's also important to point out that Cipollone knows a lot about what happened in terms of efforts to overturn the election results, which could also border on criminality for the former president as well. And the committee wants all that information. So Congressman Adam Kinzinger, the other Republican on the January 6th committee, says that the panel's getting a lot more information. Take a listen to this.
Congressman, since Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, have new witnesses come forward to want to speak up?
Yes. Again, I don't want to get into who or any of those details, but it's not even just Cassidy. By the way, she's been inspiring for a lot of people. This happens every day. Every day we get new people that come forward and say, hey, I didn't think maybe this piece of a story that I knew was important, but now that you guys are, I do see this plays in here.
And as somebody who covers the committee every day, I'm almost obsessed with this, that these hearings are not the final chapter here. They're still interviewing witnesses on a daily basis. They're obviously getting in more information. Margaret, the committee's really managed expectations. They've tried to not overhype and underdeliver. Up until this point, they've been successful there. But what do you think about what Kinzinger just said?
I mean, for sure, it's provocative and raises a lot more questions. Ryan, as you know, one of the other very provocative ideas to come out of the last set of hearings was the idea that they have the texts and other testimony or depositions that suggest concerns about witness tampering, or at least pressure that was, had the perception of witness tampering around it. I think that's going to be tremendously important in the weeks going forward, both in terms of information it provides to Merrick Garland and the Justice Department, and in terms of information it provides to the public and to others in and around the former administration that, again, may have more information to come forward with. These are important building blocks.
Yeah, so Ron, let's switch gears. You're out there in sunny California, where the governor, Gavin Newsom, is running for re-election, but for some reason decided that his latest ad would run on the opposite side of the country in Florida. CNN got the exclusive first look at the ad that's going to start airing tomorrow on Fox. Let's play a sample.
Freedom, it's under attack in your state. Your Republican leaders, they're banning books, making it harder to vote, restricting speech in classrooms, even criminalizing women and doctors. I urge all of you living in Florida to join the fight, or join us in California.
First of all, Ron, it's incredible that this was a guy that not too long ago was facing a possible recall. Yeah. He's now so emboldened that he can run an ad in a completely different state during a re-election season. Do we think that this is an opening salvo for a potential run for president? Is that what Gavin Newsom is doing here?
I'm not sure if he's going to run. I don't think he's going to run against Joe Biden if Joe Biden runs, but he clearly is trying to step into a void in the Democratic Party. And as I said, as I wrote a few weeks ago, there is a job opening. There's a job vacancy in the Democratic Party for a national leader who will push back harder and in a more systematic way against what's happening in the red states than either Joe Biden or Merrick Garland have felt comfortable doing. And, Newsom hit on many of the key points that are emerging across a wide variety of states that are making it harder to vote, that are now rushing to ban abortion, that have put new limits on how teachers can talk about race and gender and sexual orientation in the classroom, and have made it easier to ban books, LGBTQ rights. I mean, virtually every red state, Florida kind of foremost among them, are doing all of these things. And Newsom, in a variety of ways, including going on Donald Trump's social media platform, I think is very much auditioning to be a leading voice for Democrats who have felt, as one pollster said to me this week, almost despair at the direction of policy that the red states and the Supreme Court are driving, and the limits of how hard Biden is willing to push back on that. So whether he's the governor of California, you wouldn't be surprised if he runs for president someday, but I don't know if that's really what's in his mind right now. What's in his mind right now, I think, is filling this vacuum that many activists have felt that Biden and Garland and others in the administration have left.
Great. All right. Well, you should check out Ron's piece on Gavin Newsom in The Atlantic. Margaret Talev, Ron Brownstein, thank you both for being here. Have a wonderful Independence Day. We so appreciate your time.
You too.
A Florida pediatrician says COVID cancel culture got her kicked off a state board. Next, Dr. Lisa Gwynn joins me to explain why the truth got her in trouble.
Tuesday, it's time to celebrate with coast-to-coast fireworks and music from Pitbull, Maren Morris, Machine Gun Kelly, Journey, Gloria Estefan, T-Pain, Old Dominion, the Doobie Brothers, Willie Nelson, and so much more. This 4th in America, join Don Lemon, Dana Bash, Ana Cabrera, and Sarah Seidner. Celebrate the 4th in America. Live Tuesday on CNN.
Forced labor looks different in different countries and different sectors. My name is Jonas Astrup. I'm the Chief Technical Advisor for the ILO Third-Party Monitoring Project in Uzbekistan. And I've been based in Tashkent for the last 4 years. Uzbekistan is the 6th largest producer of cotton in the world, but the cotton harvest in Uzbekistan is the world's largest recruitment effort, with approximately 2 million people picking cotton every year from September to November. And ILO has been monitoring the cotton harvest in Uzbekistan for child labor since 2013 and for child labor and forced labor since 2015 under an agreement with the World Bank. We have witnessed incredible changes during that time. 2 million children out of child labor and 500,000 adults out of forced labor. We have seen wages increased by over 600%. We have seen the number of labor inspectors doubled and perpetrators punished. Forced labor and child labor is now a criminal offense in Uzbekistan. We've seen awareness raising campaigns to make sure that people are aware of their rights, and we have seen a liberalization and a privatization of the agricultural system. There's still work to do in Uzbekistan, but I think it's fair to say that Uzbekistan is a success story in the world of work.
I would describe One World as compelling, inclusive, and original. I want this show to be a place where everyone watching has a stake in the global conversation.
One World with Zain Asher, tonight on CNN.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
When you travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels, connected to your world.
Our mission here at CNN and journalists, the news comes first. That's when your heart beats a little bit faster.
More breaking news that we are following right now.
You really work as hard as you can, getting the facts.
We're learning more about our alleged plot.
It is critically important.
To our viewers in the United States and around the world, welcome to the Situation Room. We have breaking news.
I'm Patrick Ottman in Havana, Cuba, and this is CNN.
A Miami pediatrician shares her medical opinion and then gets abruptly booted from the Florida Healthy Kids Board. Her professional opinion supporting the COVID vaccination of children under 5 years old ran afoul of state officials who don't support the FDA's approval of the vaccine. Dr. Lisa Gwynn joins me now. Doctor, let's be clear here. You are a medical professional with a wide range of expertise. You were on the show 2 weekends ago stressing the importance of the vaccine based on that expertise. But you apparently angered the administration of Governor Ron DeSantis by criticizing Florida's refusal to pre-order the vaccines for children under 5. I mean, what concerns you the most about the state not taking the step to pre-order these vaccines?
So, yeah, it's been a rough week or 2 weeks here in Florida trying to advocate for vaccines for all kids. So, yes, a week or so ago, the state decided that they were not going to pre-order vaccines. Therefore, we in pediatrics, we didn't know whether the state would get the vaccine or not. And so, that was kind of the narrative at that time. And we, just urged the governor to change his mind. And suddenly the state portal, which is required for us to be able to order the vaccines, suddenly it became opened up, and we were actually able to order the vaccines once the approval came through. Mm-hmm. But what's happened now, which is really more concerning and why we've been advocating as loud as we possibly could, is that the state decided that they were not going to allow local health departments to carry the COVID vaccine for children under 5. And so this has caused a lot of a lot of difficulties for not only for families who normally access their vaccines through local health departments, those families that are uninsured or just don't have a medical home, live in poverty, the underserved. So they are not able to access the COVID vaccine for their children under 5. But in addition, the local pediatricians, many of them are not able to fulfill the requirements, the minimum dose requirements for state orders. And so they rely on their local health departments to receive those vaccines. And so this was an issue of health equity. This was also an issue of distribution of the vaccine locally. And so that's what we were urging health officials to change their mind about. And then this happened out of nowhere. I just received an email stating that my services were no longer on the board. And that's kind of how it all happened.
Wow. So to kind of ask more about that, we tried to reach out to the board. They didn't respond to our questions about it. So you weren't given any reason for your removal. It's just that you spoke out about it, and then the next thing you knew, you were no longer a part of the board.
That is correct. And unfortunately, this is really not about views. I'm a pediatrician. I'm not a politician. And we actually met with the Department of Health's chief of staff about this concern that we had. We had pediatricians calling us throughout the state saying that they could not access the vaccine through their local health departments. And so this was something that we were trying to bring to the attention of the state about it. And the next thing you know, 2 or 3 days later, I'm removed from the board. So that's how it all kind of happened.
I mean, do you feel like politicians are trying to mute your medical expertise, what you know about and what you've practiced for your entire career?
Definitely so. And unfortunately, we have a Surgeon General who does not believe in science, the science of vaccines. We have waited a long time for this vaccine to finally be available for children, for young children and infants. And so the time was finally here. We were excited about it. And then to have to go through all of this, these hurdles and this, quite frankly, it's just nonsense. We just want to get the vaccines out there, available to the underserved, available to pediatricians, and it's a health equity issue. And we urge the governor and the Surgeon General to change their minds, because at the end of the day, this is a choice for parents. And if we don't have access to the vaccine, the parents can't make their own choices. And so, hopefully they'll change their minds and we will be able to get the vaccine available to all children throughout Florida.
I mean, what the governor often talks about is parents having the ability and the choice to make these decisions. If you're not even allowing the vaccine to become available, they don't even get that choice. So it seems to be taking that part out of that, at least, stance they has as it relates to this. Well, Dr. Lisa Gwynn, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. Up next, a beachfront battle rooted in racism finally comes to an end nearly a century later.
The Bruce's establishment from day one was very successful. By 1922, some white folks were up in arms that the black folks had such a successful operation here.
When you follow a story, you may be asked to take risks.
These protests are a test for Hamas, where Iraqi troops would pre-position and these Americans would advise them. The protesters are just outside a military base. They're throwing rocks. Any understanding between Israel and Gaza could quickly fall apart again.
You witness persistence, and that's where change happens.
The one thing they have in common is a determination to keep going.
Redwood Materials is a sustainable battery materials company. So, we focus on building a closed-loop ecosystem for lithium-ion batteries. We recycle old lithium-ion batteries of all different types, both automotive, but also consumer electronics. We take the materials out of those batteries, refine them, extract them, and then remanufacture them into new components that can go directly back into battery manufacture. So I see this eventually, going to be the vast majority of the materials that are going into batteries that will be recycled in the future. Batteries are amazing because they are so recyclable. More than 90% of the materials, those critical materials in the battery, can be reused many, many times without degradation. I think people are really realizing the benefits of having a high recycled material content, both in terms of the environmental footprint of the batteries, but also the cost of those materials.
Business never sleeps. As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, journalist, global market analyst, and host of CNN's First Move. Join me in the financial capital of the world for market-moving perspective on the news influencing global politics, culture, and finance. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Today on CNN.
The Manhattan District Attorney's Office is calling the murder of a New York City mom last week a premeditated execution. 20-year-old Asia Johnson was shot in the head at close range as she pushed her newborn in a stroller on the city's Upper East Side. Police arrested the baby's father Friday. He's still being held without bail. Prosecutors say the suspect convinced the victim to meet with him Wednesday under the guise of giving their daughter gifts. The baby wasn't hurt in the shooting. For the first time in Los Angeles County's history, the descendants of a black family have had their seized property returned. The Bruces had a successful beach resort until white harassment and the Ku Klux Klan ripped it away. CNN's Stephanie Elam explains how the county righted a wrong nearly 100 years later.
For decades, this beautiful California beach held shameful secrets of racism and wrongdoing, stretched out as a physical reminder of how Charles and Willa Bruce were harassed and robbed of their property nearly 100 years ago, when the city of Manhattan Beach seized Bruce's beach.
All we knew is that we were going to step up and speak out and make sure that people never forgot this wrong.
A wrong the County of Los Angeles began working to fix last year, culminating with the Board of Supervisors unanimously voting this week.
Motion carries 5-0.
To return the land to the Bruce's great-great-grandchildren, marking the first time in the county's history black descendants have had their family's land returned.
We aren't giving property to anyone today. We are returning property.
In 1912, the Bruces bought the land for more than $1,200. Eventually, they owned 2 parcels and started a business, offering a place for black people in Southern California to enjoy the scenic vistas with friends and family.
The Bruce's establishment from day one was very successful. They started with just a pop-up tent where people could change their clothes and they were selling refreshments. Then they later built a 2-story building that included a cafe, area to dance. By 1922, some white folks were up in arms that the black folks had such a successful operation here.
Then in 1924, the city of Manhattan Beach snatched the property under eminent domain to create a park. Eventually, the county took control of the estimated 7,000 square feet of land, which is currently home to a park and lifeguard training facility. The county says it has a 2-year agreement to lease the land from the Bruce family for $413,000 a year. Now surrounded by million-dollar homes, this is the property that is getting returned to the Bruce family, now estimated to be worth tens of millions of dollars, as it truly is oceanfront property.
Well, initially it cost the Bruce family their entire fortune. They had originally asked for $125,000 for the 2 pieces of property, and they didn't get that. They only got $14,250. The loss of the generational wealth that would have been accumulated over the course of 98 years now.
I feel some sense of peace. I feel joy.
Kevon Ward started the push to return Bruce's Beach to its rightful owners in 2020.
No justice. No peace.
After the murder of George Floyd.
I know it was the catalyst for me to illuminate what had happened to the Bruces and for me to move forward and take action to see how I could legally and legislatively get the land back for them.
It's a template Ward and the family hope others will use to also get their land back. Stephanie Elam, CNN, Manhattan Beach, California.
Fascinating story. Stephanie, thanks. You're in the CNN newsroom. Up next, a Formula One driver is lucky to be alive tonight after his car flipped over during a race. We'll tell you what he credits with saving his life. And join CNN for coast-to-coast fireworks and incredible music from some of the biggest stars. Celebrate the 4th in America live tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on CNN.
I'm Vedika Sood in New Delhi, and this is CNN.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
The problem with plastic is that it's indestructible. Not-plat packaging can break down in a home compost extremely fast, just like an apple or just like an orange. A lot of people were surprised that seaweed could be turned into a packaging material. We chose seaweed because it has a lot of sustainable credentials. It doesn't use fresh water or fertilizer to grow. It just grows on its own in the sea without human intervention. And on top of that, when it grows, it sequesters carbon. We partnered for the London Marathon with Lucozade. They were using plastic bottles and cups, and they were really keen to reduce the amount of waste that is created at these events. At the end of the event, it was brilliant that the trucks that clean the streets and usually have to stop at each station to pick up all of that plastic, they just drove by our station. There was nothing to pick up, so it was really incredible, the feeling that we had delivered hydration without the plastic. Nature has all of the solutions. We just have to continue getting our inspiration from it. Different plants, different trees, different vegetables. This is what the future looks like. We need to use more of other natural materials, and I think through this diversity, we can really solve this problem. And I'm really hopeful that we will.
Today, we live in an unpredictable environment, and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
The missile struck right here. What is your interpretation of Putin's intention?
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers.
What does President Putin think he has achieved in Ukraine to date?
We just want to say stop to Vladimir Putin.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
What are you looking at for the future with these additional formations that you've talked about, and where? What are the UN and other countries doing for you? Is it enough?
It's crucial we make sense of what's happening.
We are doing this for our very survival.
What do you think a peace or a ceasefire or an end to this looks like?
And fully understand what's at stake.
We have will, we have guts, and we are fighting like hell.
Amanpour, tonight on CNN.
try to be global and we try to be smart. And we try very hard to get both of those every week. What I want to hear are authentic voices of people who are passionate or intelligent about a subject, who will make you smarter, move you emotionally, who will kind of challenge your mind or move your heart. And that's the consistency that we try to get at.
Fareed Zakaria, GPS, Sundays on CNN.
Last week, 4 people lost their lives when an Amtrak train derailed after hitting a dump truck at a railroad crossing in Missouri. Some members of the community had previously raised concerns over the safety of that train intersection. It's called a passive rail crossing. And experts are warning just how dangerous they can be. CNN's Pete Muntean takes a look.
This is a dangerous enough crossing.
Missouri farmer Mike Spencer knew there was an accident waiting to happen in the middle of his field.
Let's just see this.
It was just 2 weeks ago that he posted this video on Facebook, warning of a dangerous railroad crossing. On Monday, it was here that an Amtrak train slammed into a dump truck, killing the driver, 3 train passengers, and injuring dozens more.
We hit a truck.
But this could have happened almost anywhere.
We'll start watching for trains way back.
Only a couple miles away, another example of what is known as a passive or uncontrolled rail crossing, meaning it is up to drivers alone to watch out for oncoming trains.
There are tens of thousands of uncontrolled rail crossings nationwide. No lights, no electronic barriers, just a sign.
It's very urgent because it would save lives.
National Transportation Safety Board Chair Jennifer Homendy says the agency has been urging better warnings on crossings like this since 1998.
We continue to push for infrastructure improvements like gates, bells, whistles, and hope that those do get installed. There are many different ways of addressing safety at crossings, but doing nothing is not the right answer.
The NTSB says about half of all the rail crossings in the U.S. are passive or uncontrolled, about 130,000 nationwide. Last year, there were 812 collisions at those crossings, according to federal data. Last week, 3 women were killed when their car was hit by a train at this uncontrolled rail crossing near San Francisco.
Every single one of these are preventable. It's terribly tragic and heartbreaking.
Were you afraid of this intersection?
Oh, absolutely afraid of it.
The crossing in Missouri where this week's crash took place was already identified by the state as needing improvements. The cost estimated at $400,000.
Maybe that the price of fixing this was the cost of lives. You know, and you can't put a dollar amount on that. That's what's sad.
Mike Spencer says he hopes this crash leads to nationwide change, certain the outcome here could have been much different.
I just wish it hadn't come to this.
Pete Muntean, CNN, Mendon, Missouri.
A Chinese Formula One driver is crediting safety innovations in his car for saving his life from a spectacular crash today in England. Just after the start of today's race, Zhou Guanyu, his car flipped over after contact with another car. The car slid upside down